We are entering a new era here. The first mood-lifting, antidepressant, happy plant.
We want rebel music, street music, music that breaks down people's fear of one another, music that knows who the real enemy is.
J'ai fait des films très très différents dans ma vie. Donc, pour que je vous dise qu'est-ce que c'est qui m'a mené à faire ce travail pendant tant d'années.
Ladies and gentlemen.
ريسات أنا وأبوك جبرنا الكارثة إيش يدك منتهى التشرب
كده تشوفش شو ماس
كان أنا ما اسمي يا بنت سمنة ودي كبيرة مليانة من التبطان دورت ودي شبيب
شو ماس يا معرب له
لي نهارات بدأت لي بيها غير مات وكذاك النار
ايش تحضري شو هون رجع جداي خبصك تعرفي
دائما يجي وزني
خرج أنا جاي دايوزن
دقيقة. ما يصح، انت ما تتقدي تزيدي 20 كيلو والمناسبة قريب واحنا ما نقدر نأجلوها.
ما تخافي مع الحميانة دور اسمه.
ان شاء الله يا خير.
انت تقد تخليني عنك.
انت تتكلمي في وجهي بنوع من الطريقة.
انك انانيه، انت وحدك وزواجك لعين وبروحك السخيف.
انا عندي ياسر من المشاكل.
انت ماشية معايا بهذه الطريقة راني لين اكرهك طول حياتي.
Ladies and gentlemen.
Hi, good afternoon, or rather good evening, everybody. Welcome to the last film talk in Europe on Screen this year. And tonight we will talk with Michela Occhipinti, the director of Flash Out that we saw just now in Festival Scope. Hi, Michela.
Hello, how are you?
Hi, I'm good. How about you?
Very well, thank you.
Okay, and before we begin, Michela, I just want to address our audience that you all can participate in this talk by typing in your questions on the Q&A box in the Zoom link below. If you want to ask questions in Indonesian, I will translate to English because this entire session will be conducted in English. Michela, I understand that you are in Rome at the moment?
I am in Rome, yes, in my
Okay.
house. Yeah.
All right. And how is it there
It's
right
okay.
now?
I mean, we are lucky to be in a region where it's they divided regions for COVID in yellow, orange, and red, going from the least problematic to the most problematic. And we're still in a yellow region, but already we cannot move out of our region, more or less, because neighboring regions are red and you cannot get in. So, but it's okay.
Yep.
I mean, considering that a big part of the world is in deep trouble, everything
It
is.
is.
But I'm very sad. I was not. You had to do better than nothing, the festival online, because I would have loved to come back to Indonesia. I traveled in Indonesia many times and I went to many places. Yes.
When was the last time you came here?
It's a few 10 years ago, but I went to Mentawai, I went to Sulawesi, to Kalimantan, to everywhere, really, in many places, to Jakarta, to Yogyakarta, to many places I traveled. So I love it. I love Indonesia.
Well, thank you. And I think you traveled more than any average Indonesians. I mean, not many have gone to
That
Mentawai.
happens in many countries where I go. I travel a lot. And so often I know the country better than
the native,
the country, not the culture, of course, but the sites, let's say, the geographical sites. Yes.
Okay. And yeah, let's talk about your film Flash Out. I remember I saw this the first time, me and my co-director, Putri, we saw this in Berlinale last year. And we were stunned. We were shocked at the end of the film because it's the culture that we were not familiar with. In fact, that we live in almost like the opposite of what is being portrayed in the film. That we were always told losing weight equals beauty or good looking, and now we see that in another part of the world that we seldom hear of, this culture exists. So my first question is, how did the story come to you, and what made you decide that, okay, I want to do this as your first feature-length fiction film?
Well, because before this, I shot a documentary that was half a hybrid, half documentary and some scripted, on a postman in the Thar Desert in India. Every time I decide to tell a story, it comes from a personal issue. And you can ask yourself, how can it be personal in Africa? First of all, for me, is not about the culture. Mainly it's about our level of humanity. That's what I'm drawn to more than where the culture comes secondly in for me. Because that was a time, it was a long time ago, in around 2011. That's when I had the idea, and I pitched it to my producers. I I was considering my body. I was watching my body transform in front of me, but because of other reasons, I was getting older, and I started having lines, and things start to decay, and I started asking myself, but why does this bother me on an aesthetic level? Because I understood it bothered me on a philosophical level, because life gets shorter the more exactly, so you start fearing death and things like that, which is completely natural and human. But what really bothered me is, why did this disturb me on a aesthetic level? And then I started realizing how much pressure is put on our bodies, especially as women, since the beginning of time. You have to fit in certain models that somebody else has decided for you, and these models change not only within from culture to culture, which is a bit more understandable, but they even change within the same culture, within the same countries, over the years. You remember, no, in the 19th century, women were portrayed in paintings as being really flourishing and having cellulite even, and it was considered a sign of beauty. Also, not to go that far, until the 50s and 60s in Italy, when a child was born and the child was a bit puffy, he or she was considered to be in good health, whereas when you were very skinny, you were considered to be in poor health. But then things changed immediately at a certain point. Then women in fashion, they have to be for a few years with a very thin waist, but with big butts, and then skinny in the 60s and 70s, and changing always. And so I started really questioning myself, who dictates these models, and why do they change all the time, and why do we follow them? Why are we so fragile? Why aren't we able to stand up for ourselves and just be who we are, regardless of what any kind of beauty models we are we're faced to? And I started asking myself, especially, it's about a lot to do about with freedom, with our personal freedom. I think that we in the Western world, we think we are much more free than what we actually are, because we think that we're thinner because we want to, but we don't want to. I don't think it's to stay in a normal, an average size is, I understand, health wise, but to be too thin, or to have big boobs, or to have a straight nose, it's a lack of freedom, because we are following some rules that somebody else is dictating. So I was really interested, what is the exact gap between our perceived freedom and our actual freedom? And I wanted to tell this somehow, but what I'm interested in is in telling stories through different paradoxes. So when I found out, reading an article about women having to get weight on, because having to do the opposite thing for the same reason, to become more beautiful, to become more appreciated, I thought this was a perfect way to tell the story on the other side, like if it was the opposite side of the mirror. And in fact, because this at least it made me understand even more how crazy our own models are. If in another part of the world, the exact opposite is wanted, so nothing is correct anymore. You should be whatever you want to be, and not follow any kind of rules. So that's the first thing that drew me to this story.
But what is interesting is that despite the opposite that happens in Mauritania and in the Western world that you said, yet the suffering is the same, to follow this so-called ideal body model. We see the lead character here. She suffers following the rules that is set by She only understands it from her mother, who understands it from her mother as well. So I just want to know, and given the fact that the character is not actually living in the cave, I mean, she is very much modern girl. She plays with the phone, she hangs with her friend. But is this actually happening among the current generation in Mauritania?
Allora, first of all, it is, Mauritania is a very, it's a big country with only 3 million inhabitants, more or less. And so it's really huge. It's like 5 times France. So it's a really big country. And it's difficult to understand the percentages because there is not a sociological study and everything. But I would say from what I saw in my many travels, I've been traveling in Mauritania 4 times between 2012 and 2018. I would say in the cities, it's around 20% of women who do it, or because their family have them do it, or because they decide to do it at a certain point. Like you decide to go on a diet on your own. At a certain point, you become so, how do you say, you are used to that. So that becomes also your model, and you start doing it on yourself out of sort of a free will, which is never a free will for me. But then in the desert, in the villages of the desert, it happens much more. I think at least half of the girls do it, but even more, I think. Every time I went to a family, at least one member of the family did at a certain point, was force-fed at a certain point. But in the villages, they do it a lot to young girls, because they become women before their body. If you put on a big amount of weight in a short amount of time, your body develops earlier. And so they are given into marriage. Absolutely, I agree with you what you said. What I found really interesting is that whatever the goal you're trying to obtain from your body, whatever the transformation you're trying to obtain, that might be different, but that didn't really, that I wasn't interested in what the shape was, the final shape. The path that you do to obtain that, whatever shape you're trying to obtain, is exactly the same. It's a path of suffering, and it's also a path of unconsciousness, in the sense that you're not really aware of what you're doing, because you're just doing it either because it's your family who force feeds you, or because it's you who decides to go to the surgeon to cut your body, or to take off grease, or to add pieces. It's still not natural. Neither one is natural. Somebody or something is obliging you to comply to something that is decided by somebody else or something else. May it be the market, may it be the fashion industry, may it be men, may it be even all the various companies that do how do you call them, aesthetic, like perfumes and creams and things,
beauty products,
beauty products, exactly. I think there is a big mixture of everything, because if there is no demand, there is no you don't sell. That's it. So you have to create different kinds of demands, because if there's always the same demand, after a while you don't sell anymore. But if you every 5 years you change kind of demand, you go on inventing new products, inventing new things that you can sell. So I think that's a lot to do with it.
And it's also interesting to see how strong they hold on to traditions despite the access of information. I mean, we see them playing with their phones, we see them connected to the outside world, but yet the outside world does not seem to influence their daily life that much.
No, because I tell you, what is super interesting, I think, about Mauritania, that I discovered completely while traveling there, is that, first of all, we decided to pick up a girl with the scriptwriter, Michela Occhipinti, my co-script writer. We wrote it together. We decided to pick a girl in the city because it was of biggest importance that she did the same things we did. And in big cities, people have the same life, more or less, whether it's in East Asia or in Western world or in Africa or in South America, the life in big cities is very similar to every country, for me, at least. That's what I see when I travel. Then there are difficult cuisines, different cultures, but the life you lead more or less is the same. And it was very important that so that the audience could feel a connection to the character, that they could recognize yourself in her. She has a normal life, she has her friends, she goes everywhere. But Africa, what is interesting in general as a continent, and in Mauritania very much so, it's a mixture of everything. They have Western music, they have African music, because it's been a former colony, so they speak French as a second language. Not very few people speak French, but French is the second language, is the former language of their former French colony. And they have access to all the world. They have access to internet. They can see anything that happens everywhere in the world. But in the same time, they are so attached to their culture, their own culture, that even if they do see that in the rest of the world things are different, in many, many families, things are very, very traditional. But things are changing also there. So like gavage, force feeding, was born a long time ago, because it was a means for the man of the family, the chief of the family, to show to the society that he was wealthy enough to have enough money that he could well feed the women of his family, and that they could stay at home and not work and just stay down and eat, and so gain weight. No, then it became a sign of beauty. But now rich families don't need to do that anymore, because what they do to show their wealth, they just have big cars, big houses, fashion, high fashion accessories for women, because then they are veiled, but they have high fashion bags, high fashion shoes, etc. So that's a means. So now it's much more the low and middle classes who do force feeding still, because they want to show that they are better than what they actually are. Like we do when we invite people at home, we always put the nice tablecloth and wear the nice. It's not only because we want to feel well; it's because we want to show. This film has a lot to do also with how much importance we give to other people's gaze on us, whereas the most important look on us should be ours. And that's another thing on which we're not free. And for me, it's very universal, because we all do things like this. Some do it in a way, some in another, but the nature of what we do is very, very similar. That's why I was interested so much to do the film in another country and show that whatever it is we're doing, even if we're doing something completely opposite, the reason why we're doing it is very similar. And the suffering we go through is very similar. And the lack of freedom is very similar. In some countries, it's given from the state, more from the state. In other countries, it's given more from our minds, that we decide to put them in little cages and we decide not to be free. Sorry, I see a question. I don't know if you should.
Yeah, I think we can discuss later, or if we want to do it now.
Okay, after we do all the questions.
Yeah, okay. I'm also interested in the casting. I understand that you cast non-professional actors here, and meaning that is this the first time they act?
Yes, allora, the film started, I wanted to make a documentary, because that's what I used to do. I shot a documentary in Malawi many years ago, and a documentary in Argentina, my first one. I just generally did documentaries, but with the former feature that was not a fictionalized film, because it was, I also just filmed what was happening in front of me, but it was also scripted on the postman. I started understanding that, in fact, that was my favorite way of communicating. I don't want to go, this is by accident a complete scripted film. I cannot say fictionalized, because it's not really fiction also. It's completely scripted, but it's scripted on everything I heard from all the girls and women I met in my many travels to Mauritania. Because first of all, there are not a lot of actors in Mauritania because there are no cinemas. The only screen there is, at least until 2 years ago, is the screen there is in the French Cultural Institute, the only screen.
Okay.
So there is not a cinema where you go pay a ticket, and there are a few production companies, very small. They do soap operas and sitcoms and things like. At a certain point, the main character Verida with her little sister Karimato, they watch soap opera on TV, and that's a Mauritanian production. That's what they do. So the only actors in the film are the grandmother. She is an actress of soap operas there, and that's it. And then Salem, the man who plays, he has couple of scenes. He plays Verida's the father. He is the director of the Maison des Cinéastes in Nouakchott, which is the house of cinema, let's say. Even if there is no cinema, they having one of the biggest directors of the world, Abderrahmane Sissako. They are interested in cinema, but there is no cinema. And he is the uncle of Verida. And Verida, I found her through him, the first travel. And the Ashetu, the woman who plays the mother, is Salem's wife. She's Verida's aunt in real life. And Karimato is Verida's real little sister. And one of the two friends is her real best friend. It was important. I chose Verida. I was looking for a girl, and I chose her because it was very important for me that the girl that I chose, we had a connection, and we did immediately. Her eyes had to be super expressive. And what struck me about Verida is something that is not logical. It's just feeling. I felt her eyes expressed a mixture of melancholy and sadness, but also of wildness and brightness. And in fact, she has lived. It was important that the people who acted in the film would know, because they lived already what we were talking about. So Verida was in marriage when she was 17, and she married a man chosen by her family in her first wedding, and she did undergo gavage. So she knew exactly. So 70% of the film is based on her life, and the rest is based on the everything that was told to me by all the different women and men I met in my path. So, and then she remarried. In real life, she divorced and she remarried, as we tell in the film, that divorce is quite easy. And it's, in fact, it's even desired. It's desirable that women are divorced because they are considered more attractive. So I had to work with non-actors, but I want to work with non-actors because it is the stories I write are stories that are so attached to reality that, in a way, I want to let's say, I want to direct them because I want to script them, because it is important for me to tell every aspect of the story. That if I chose a girl that didn't have like the best friend who wants to take pills, or a friend who divorces, you tell only part of the story. And also because I really thought about this. To do a documentary, I thought in this case particularly would have been a bit too voyeuristic. I wouldn't like to follow a girl doing this in her daily life and being a participant in what she was doing. I thought it was not right ethically. This is my very personal point of view. It was important for me to find a girl who already lived it. Verida wants to be an actress in her life, really, so that she did it because she wanted to act. And we had a contract where she acted and she is paid for it. So everything was very clear. Then it didn't, we became friends in the meantime, but it was important to have a working relation also. That was very clear, because in documentaries, if you stay for a long time with somebody, it becomes very complicated. You cannot pay somebody that you're filming, but in the same time, it's not even right not to pay, because this film, whether it's a small film, is generating a little something at least, or maybe a big something, not in my case. But you see, so I think that documentaries are very complicated to understand what to do. Like with my first film, with the Postman, that was a documentary, but he was also acting a little. Instead of paying him in a way that was weird, I asked him, what would you like? And he said, I have a debt because I I married my the last of my daughters, and I have a debt of this amount of money.
Yeah.
And I gave him the debt he had,
Okay.
because that would change his life.
Mhm.
Vito, but it wouldn't also, you cannot create something that has no following. You cannot
Yeah.
pay also too much somebody for a role that he will probably never have again, because it's not, cinema is not going to happen in that part of the desert in India. It's very complicated to decide what is right to do. You always do something wrong at least, but I think it was really important to have non-actors. And anyway, there were no actors, but this is already now a way I found to shoot films that I really love. Very small crews. The first we were 3, this one we were 8. Very small crews, everything very natural, and non-actors who practically reenact their own lives in a way.
I just want to go back to the beginning of the production and then later on the beginning of the film. You mentioned that you came across this project in 2011, and all through these years, I just want to know how did you convince the financiers to get funding for a project with a story that I'm sure that they are not familiar with?
No, it was super complicated. It was super complicated, because we went when it was still sort of a documentary.
Yeah.
We were selected by Vision du Réel, in Nyon in Switzerland, which is a big documentary festival. But I already had told my producer at the time, I think it's not a good idea, because this is already going on the verge of something that is not so much of a documentary, but it was at the beginning still. I only made one travel at that point, so the story was not so completely clear. I knew more or less the outline, but it was not a script, but it was not even a documentary completely. So but I went there, and a lot of people were of let's say potential partners were interested, very interested in the story, because most of them never even heard about it. But there was the big concern. The big concern was a question that at that time, I was a bit disturbed by it, because I thought, but why? I don't have. But then I understood where the concern was coming from. The big question was why you, as a Western woman, would want and be able to do a story on an African woman. I think at that moment, I didn't know really well what to answer. And then I answered, look, for me, my neighbor in Rome might be more distant from me than the girl I will meet in Africa. I don't know. Maybe yes, maybe no. Because as I was telling at the beginning, for me, of course, culture matters. Not only culture matters, but culture forges a lot who and what you are. But what forges you more than culture and more than religion and more than anything else is the way you are human, which means your heart and your mind, regardless of the great things that also forge you, like where you're from, what you eat, what you believe in. But I think that more than anything, we are human beings, and the religion and the rest comes after.
Yeah.
And so that for me was important to, and also, but this could happen even if you stay all your life in your little house, but you have a sensitivity that you're able to contact people. But more than anything, I have lived abroad since I was 4. I used to live in Hong Kong. Then I lived in Switzerland. Then I lived in Congo. Then I traveled 1 year in South America. Then I traveled in many, many countries of the world, all over, in Asia, in East Asia, in Africa, in South America, in North America, in Oceania, in Australia. I traveled a lot in my life. So for me, I came to live in Rome when I was 14. And the first question I asked, I said, but why are we all the same color here? Because I was not used to it. So, but I think that this you can have, even if you don't travel, you have a sensitivity that approaches you to people, regardless of their origin, their country of origin. But I understood the question was coming from the fact that as former colonizers, not me in person and not Italy in particular, but also Italy, but being part of Europe that has been colonizing and killing most of the world for too long, there is this weight. There is this weight of responsibility that falls into the generations. And I totally understand it, because regarding my generation, I am like the children or the grandchildren of who colonized. So I am still I carry on my weight this responsibility. But for me, I knew but I couldn't convince people because I had only made one feature that was a documentary, that was a very slow film. Nobody knew my approach, but I had the certainty that I wouldn't be non-judgmental because I am I am non-judgmental. I am in my life, so why should I be judgmental in the film? So that was the main thing, that it was super complicated. But like always it happens, I had problems in my personal life after a couple of years of trying to finance the film. And so I quit a little. I told my producers, look, I quit. But just then, the first financing came from Creative Europe of the European Union. So we are in your festival. We are in the right subject talking about this. So and so it was a slate fund that my producer won for 3 films, and one was Nico 1988 by Susanna Nicchiarelli, that's a super hit. One was Figlia Mia, Daughter of Mine, the second film by Laura Bispuri that did her first film was Sworn Virgin Virgin, that was a big success also, and mine was the smallest, and so we got the smallest part of the financing, but it was perfect because it allowed us to develop. It was a development fund, and from then we had funding. But it's a very small budget film. But I mean, compared to any film, most films, it's got more a budget that resembles one of a documentary. But I was happy because I think the story is simple, and I wanted to shoot it in a simple way. I didn't need cranes and things, helicopters. I like to shoot in a very simple way because it is a very simple story, and I don't want to. I think that photography is very important in films because it's an audio visual, so also sound and photography. Photography is very important, but it has to match the story you're telling. You cannot make an epic movie when the story is non-epic. You see what I mean? That's my personal point of view. I don't like to have big camera movements if the story is a small story. I think it doesn't fit the story. It doesn't tell it, and it doesn't serve the story well. It wouldn't.
And you mentioned something about not being judgmental, which I find that the film is not judgmental at all. But what strikes me as I rewatched the film just now is that you begin the film with Farida drinking milk, or more like slurping milk, and then her eyes gaze directly to camera. And as the film progresses on, we realize that that was the only time Farida gazes directly at camera. And yeah, as the story unfolds, as the story continues, we realize that the scene plays quite an important part in the film. For me, it's like it signals that she is actually suffering, she is actually in pain. So what made you decide to use that particular scene as the beginning of the film?
I decided because that first shot, you don't she didn't start yet because in the first scene she is waking up by her mother, who announces her that they found a husband for her and that she will start gavage. So she didn't start. For me, that scene was super important to put at the beginning because it's a way to tell you, look at me, because you are guilty too. Because whoever is watching is guilty, because if you don't speak up for yourself and you don't try to start saying from today, wherever you are, whatever the thing that is being imposed on you, saying, no, I don't want to be thin. I don't want to be that. I want to be me. I don't want to have big boobs. It's okay if they fall. I'm getting old. It's okay if I have lines. It's okay if I have 5 kilos more, 10 kilos more. It's okay if I have 3 kilos less. It's okay if I am who I am. So the gaze of Verida directly in the camera is very, very subtle for me, but it was a way for me to express. Then, of course, whoever the audience is will have a different feeling, I suppose. But for me, it was a way to say, without saying it, but just like, I'm looking at you and look at me, because what is happening to me and what is happening to you is very similar. Don't walk away. Don't think that we're different and because I have to gain kilos and you don't do it, it doesn't concern you. It concerns you, because I'm a human being exactly like you, and what I'm doing here is a tradition, okay, but it's not okay. It's not okay anymore to do it. And in fact, this is changing in Mauritania. In fact, Verida has 2 daughters, and she decided not to have them force fed because, you know, like in every bad practice, every family, every culture has many bad practices, okay? And there is always a generation who says, okay, stop, because otherwise we would still be in the prehistoric caves, as you were saying before. And thankfully, we are progressing. We progress slowly, then we go back, then we progress a little more. And every family, thank God, apart from the society, also every family progresses a little and decides to, because force feeding is a bad practice. This is for sure. For me, what was important was to put it on the same level of what we do with our bodies going to crazy surgeons that cut you. I mean, when I say so, some women tell me, but we do it out of our will. But it cannot be your will. It's your will that is so conditioned that you don't even realize that it's not a free choice at all. It's not a free choice, because I think that no person on the world would really actually say, okay, I really want to go and cut myself and take off some grease or put in some silicone things or sew my nose because I want it that way. I think that if we were really free, we would accept what we have and say, wow, look, I'm cool. I have a different nose from everybody. Oh, I'm cool. I have big jaws. Oh, look, I'm cool. I have a big butt. I mean, we would start to appreciate what we have, because our body is an important means of expressing ourselves in the world. Otherwise, we would be souls only, no? We would be.
And yeah, it takes guts, it takes bravery for Farida to break the circle by not allowing her daughters to go through the same
but now
process.
it's starting to be more and more this way, because they're evolving. Like a few years ago, the Ministry of Health, the Mauritanian Ministry of Health, launched a campaign not to do force feeding anymore because it was bad for the health, because a lot of women die of it. Used to die of it because it's a straining for the heart also. If you put a lot of kilos in a short time, your heart suffers a lot, and other parts of your body, there's too much weight in a short amount of time. So
Michela, I think we need to answer some questions here from audience. The first question is from Lukman. Hello, Michela. I think this is a wonderful movie about Mauritanian culture. Is Flesh Up the first movie that discusses about this particular tradition? And for yourself, why are you attracted deeply to Mauritanian culture? Is there any emotional relations between you and Mauritania?
Hello, Lukman. Thank you for your question. So thank you so much and for considering the film wonderful. Mauritanian culture, as I said at the beginning, it was I got to know it because I was interested in the issue. So Mauritanian culture was not the departing point. It was the ongoing point. It became a big issue and a big involvement for me. But I was not attracted to Mauritania as a country. I was attracted to the subject, and the gavage, force feeding, is practiced in Mauritania mainly. Then from what I know, in some parts of Niger, and then I discovered that it was practiced also in some parts of Morocco, some parts of Tunisia, but mainly in Mauritania. So that's what. Then I don't have a particular now I do have a big emotional relation with Mauritania, but before I didn't. But I do have a very big connection with the African continent in general, because my grandmother was French and she was born in Algeria. My father was born in Tunis, and my brother was born in Cairo in Egypt. And as I was saying, I spent part of my life in Morocco, part of my childhood also in Congo, and I've traveled a lot the continent. So but in general, I have a connection with countries in the world. I like to discover. For me, the most beautiful thing I can do in my life is to travel and meet and discover. A film for me, the film I do, has to be a whole process of big discovery, of discovery in 360 degrees, people, food, culture, practices. But it's when I realize the most similarities we have. it's like that. It's really, thank you anyway, Lukman. Then we go to Liza.
Yeah, the question is, Chow, is there any challenge in explaining to the people or locals who were involved in the film that it was not about criticizing their society? Because I think the film successfully avoids the feeling of Westerner in exotic lands. And I'm also curious, what do you want people to think about after they watch the film? Thank you for making El Corpo della Sposa. I feel like it's really eye-opening. Grazie mille.
Thank you, Liza. Thank you so much. It was a challenge in explaining to the people that it was not about criticizing the society, but it lasted very short because it was really my starting point. My starting point. I started before I knew about Mauritania. I was really criticizing my own society, saying, "But how?" Because when I started asking myself about my body, I really started noticing much more what we as women we do to our bodies, even men, but women much more. And because it's been always a pressure on women's bodies since the beginning of times. Men, it started to be in the last couple of decades, as far as I know. And I started seeing what crazy things we do, but we think that it's normal to go to the surgeon and cut and do as I was saying. So it was so inside me this that my conversations, I went in so many houses, because when I went the first time, after a week, I met Sidi, the guy who plays the scale boy that falls in love with Verida. He is a very good friend of mine. He became, because he's been accompanying me every travel. He was my driver, my translator, my everything. And then and mainly he's my friend now. And he brought me to all the people he knew, the houses, and I went into these houses with him. So they trusted him, and they immediately trusted me, especially because I would explain them the reason why I wanted to do it, and they immediately understood. But more than anything, what really made them trust me is that I kept on coming back and coming back and coming back. And I tell you that Nouakchott is not the easiest city of all, because it's a big city. There's a lot of traffic. Most streets don't have names on them. So you have to say, most streets don't have names. Most streets are made of sand. 95% of people don't speak neither French nor English, and I'm fluent in French. I'm bilingual because I lived abroad many years. So it was super complicated to go there, and so they knew, because there's not a lot of foreigners who go to Mauritania. There are, because it's a beautiful country. So and there's a lot of interesting cultural and historical things to discover, but it's not like Morocco, where there's loads of tourists, or I don't know, Kenya, or a lot of other. So they understood I was going back and promising to come back and coming back. So let's say that trust built slowly, and it in the end it was easy.
How long did the whole coming back and forth?
Allora, the first time I went in 2012 alone for a month to discover, to meet, and start writing everything. Every girl told me, or man or boy or girl, I write everything. I had a big booklet with all the stories. Then I went back to Rome. I started writing. We had 2 years of difficulty because we find financing. I stopped for a while. Then when the financing of Creative Europe arrived, that's when I started writing again, and I left again. So in 2016, I went back, this time with somebody from production, and we started making a few deals. Then I came back in 2018 for 3 weeks with 2 people of production, and the last 5 days with the director of photography. And then I went back after 2 months to shoot, to prepare, because the first 9 days were a preparation, and then to shoot. And I stayed nearly 2 months. So I just say a lot of time, because all in all, I spent in Mauritania 4 months, but I went 4 different travels. I'm also going to think about, Allora, want to think. She said, I'm also curious, what do you want people to think about after they watch the film? I think I want people to think what they want, but in the same time, my goal is, if there is even 1 or 2 or 3 girls or men, but especially girls, who after seeing this film tell themselves, okay, but so if in a part of the world the value is 10, and in the other part of the world the value is -10, so it makes 0. So it means that I do what I want with my body. I hope that it gives some people who maybe have fragilities or things, the will to think, you know what, I'm gonna have my body be exactly what it is, being happy about it and not wanting to change it. I mean, if you want to be a bit more sporty and you want to do sports, it's only healthy, but not to try to obtain crazy goals, because everybody has their own body and they're beautiful exactly the way they are. For me, it's a matter of changing the way we look, not changing our body. Yes, it's a part of our body, but our eyes, we have to change the gaze we have on our bodies and our other people's bodies. And we have to change the language too. We cannot say, because you see in Italy, for instance, my little girl, she's 6, nearly 7. I remember 2 years ago, she came back saying, I don't want to put those trousers on because I have big thighs. I said, but who told you this? I mean, if in school at already 5 years old, some kids talk about your thighs, the size of your legs or of your body, it means that some parents talk about it at home. And we have to change this. We have to not use shameful words to describe bodies, whether it's too thin or whether it's too full. We don't have to. We have to change our gaze and the language. If people who watch my film change a little the gaze and the language and try to understand what freedom is all about, bingo, I'm super happy. This is the main point for me. Then I'm happy to go to festivals. Of course I'm happy. I'm happy to win awards. Of course I'm happy. But for me, in my very intimate life, what really is I'm interested in is in having some people think in a different way, even seeing something so distant culturally, but feeling such a connection to it in a very opposite way, but a big connection already is something, already is, for me, is a beautiful thing. So grazie mille to you, Liza.
And I couldn't agree more on the language, because I understand that when people start commenting on other people's body or their own body, it starts from the family. And this is what I also see in the film, that the mother casually talks or comments about their daughters, you are too thin, or
that has to stop. That has to stop. What I think it's correct to suggest is do some sports, because the sports are good for your mind, and sports are good also to keep you healthy. I'm not talking about fit, but healthy. Healthy is important, but it's not important how much you weigh, what is your measurements. It's important to feel healthy, and that's it. That's the only thing we should look at on bodies, and then to feel harmony. And a beautiful body for me is a body that is in harmony with the mind. Full stop. That's it.
And another question is from Cara. Hi, Michela. Thank you for this great film. I was wondering, how did you come about the international title Flesh Out, as the original Italian title is actually The Body of a Bride?
Cara, thank you very much for watching the film and liking it. In fact, it's the other way around, in the sense that the original title is Flesh Out.
Okay.
And then the Italian title, we thought about it so much, Il corpo della sposa. Especially, it was important for me that the word in Italian, that the word body or weight or something was inside, and the Italian distributor Lucky Red came out with this title at the beginning. I was not sure of it, but now I like it very much. But I like it in Italian, Il corpo della sposa. In English, The Body of the Bride is a It's important also, the phonetics of a Flesh Out was a very very criticized title from some American audiences. But when I got the title once, I went to exhibit and I saw flesh and bones, and I said, flesh is perfect, but flesh, unfortunately, in Italian, there is not such a word as flesh, because in English, you have two words, flesh and meat. Flesh is your own meat. Meat is the meat of animals or the meat you eat, etc. In Italian, you have only the word carne, which is meat. It's not flesh. So I wanted absolutely to use the word flesh. I thought it was a perfect word to describe what I wanted to talk about. But I didn't know, because flesh has also a lot to do with religious things, the flesh, in flesh. And and so when I found out flesh out on, I was looking on words that have flesh, I saw that it has many meanings. The problem was one meaning for the criticizing part, because the meaning is something that is in transformation, putting on meat, putting on weight. So it was, these two meanings were perfect, but it also means to stress out, to flesh out a character, meaning to give it a good right identity. So the title was criticized at a point that when I went to the Tribeca Film Festival, and an American boy interviewed me, I asked him, but is the title Flesh Out wrong for what I, and he said, no, it's perfectly right. But I think that for some people, some English tongue people use flesh out more to say, to flesh out a character, and some use it more to say something in transformation, something putting on weight, because something in transformation and putting on weight seem to me fantastic as a meaning. But I understand now that Il Corpo della Sposa is probably a better title, but you know, mistakes you make on the way when you're doing and thinking so many things. But yes, it was an issue, this Flesh Out title, but I called it Flesh Out from year 2. So after 6 years of calling it Flesh Out, I couldn't change it. I was unable. I didn't find a good, I still prefer in English, whether it's been criticized or not, flesh out to the body of the bride, because a body of the bride is, Il Corpo della Sposa sounds also well.
Okay. And the last question is from Mala. Ciao, Michela. Ferida's story is very shocking yet touching. Have you got any chance to show the film in front of those Western Perfect 10 magazine who enforces different beauty standard? I am curious on the response. Also, have the film been screened in Mauritania in EoS? What was the response?
Hi, Mala. Thank you. Thank you for watching the film and for your thoughts. No, I didn't show. I don't think the film has been seen by these magazines that. Sorry, Perfect 10 of those perfect. What does it mean of those Western Perfect 10 magazines?
It's the.
I mean, all the magazines, like
yes.
the big one who tell you that you should be.
Yeah.
No, I don't think they watched it, because none of them wrote an article on it. I don't know. The film has not been screened in Mauritania, unfortunately, because last year I was supposed to go and screen it in the only festival there is in Mauritania, but it's a festival of short films. It's called the Nouakchott instead of Nouakchott. It's the name of the capital, but it's like Nouakchott. And unfortunately, they a bit disappeared. So when it was the time to tell me what day exactly, what support did they need, Blu-ray, whatever, or a DVD or whatever it was, and to know where I was sleeping, to have a ticket, they never answered. So 4 days before, I was in another country in a festival, and they still didn't tell me anything. So I didn't know what day exactly of the 5 days it was, because then it was a moment where I was going to festivals. So I had always, and so unfortunately I had to dismiss it, because and then they started saying, no, we send you a ticket. And then another half day passed. I said, look, really, I cannot come, because then it takes a long time to, when you arrive at the airport, to have the visa stamped and everything. And I have a daughter, I have to organize. So I told them, look, I'm super sorry, I cannot come. You have to organize it with a bit of advance, at least 2 weeks before. Let me know which is the exact day, and let me have an air ticket. So we had to cancel it. Then I started trying to organize it again, but then the coronavirus arrived. So now I would really like to, as soon as all this mess finishes for all the world, I hope that we can organize it through maybe the French Cultural Institute, so we can use their, or maybe next October. At this point, if life starts again in a normal way, the only Mauritanian people who saw the film were Verida, the main character, Amal, best friend, and Sidi. They came to the Berlinale.
Mhm.
2 years ago in 2019, and they liked it a lot. They felt very represented by it. And then some girls in France from Mauritania wrote to me saying that they found the film really it reminded them of everything their aunts and mothers and grandmothers always told them. So then you never know. Of course, when I show it in Mauritania, every person, the film was also not liked by people I met that told me, no, I didn't like your film. Okay. Or I wrote bad reviews. It's okay. It's perfectly fine. And it's also very, very natural that it is this way. Nobody and nothing apart from some perfect things like the sun or mountains or anything human people, apart from some geniuses in the world that are really that you cannot say anything else but what a masterpiece. Normal people like me do things that are liked and not liked by people, which is perfectly fine because it respects also the way we are. We don't like everybody and we're not liked by everybody, which is super cool because at least the world is a bit different. Otherwise we would all...
That's true.
But I'm
But
very, it is the screening, sorry if I'm interrupting, it is in Mauritania the screening that of course I fear the most because I'm talking about them. So
yeah,
I still back my film. I like my film. I believe, you know, every day I had to go to shooting, I was really worried because I would say, oh my God, I never had people act so much. I never directed acting people because the postman was just walking and saying 3 words. So this is the first time I have people act, and so then people who act for the first time mainly. So I was a bit agitated, but then I went on telling myself, don't worry because you will do mistakes. So don't worry about not doing mistakes because you will do mistakes. But I told myself, the film has to have some heart because if it doesn't have heart, it's not worth it. And I was worried until the end, the last editing, because you know, you never know until the film is completely finished. And I have to say, to this day, after 2 years, that every time I saw the film again, I really find it has his flaws. It has flaws because I have flaws, and the film resembles me, but it has heart. I can say today, I think the film has heart. So I am happy with it, even in its simplicity and with its flaws. I think it was worth it in the end.
It does have heart, I agree. And my last question is, are you planning to show this film to your daughter?
Yes, I will. Now she's a bit small, but I will. She came when we did the first screening in Rome in a cinema. She came at the beginning, and I let her go out, and then I let her see only the end where the film is dedicated to her. In the end, I left it in Italian because it was really something personal, and I didn't want to translate it. But it says per Ada di più al mondo. For Ada, more in the world. It's said in a bad Italian, but because that's how she told me. She always told me, I love you more than anything in the world. But instead of saying more than, she only said more than the world. So I wrote that because in fact the film is also for her and for her generation of girls.
Yes.
I hope they are all completely free to choose whatever they want. But I see the things are not starting well because in school she already is picking up some language. No, she's not doing it on others, but like the thing I told you about her legs being a bit too full because somebody told her so. And so the things don't seem so positive. I hope that in the next few years, things will change and people start really talking about in a different way, describing bodies in a different way. You see, I try to say fuller instead of fatter. I try to say healthier instead of fatter because fuller and full is beautiful because empty is empty, but empty is beautiful as well. We have to give importance to the words. It's very important the way we express ourselves and the way we look at others, because if we look at others in a way we don't want to be looked at, we're going to receive that thing. So I hope that the education is going to come within families, in schools, in society, in small and at large, where people start really, really, really talking and looking in a different way.
Yeah. yeah, words matter because we always remember what people say about us.
Absolutely, and it stays like a wound, capito? If somebody, when you're little or when you, even when you're older, but in the time that you're young, in your teenage years or when you're little, some words can be your destiny, in the sense that they hurt you so much that you never forget about them, and you start thinking that that's you, but that's not you. That's a word that somebody else decided to describe you with. But it's important not to have people live this, and so let's start changing our language and watching things in a different way.
Yeah, I mean, you couldn't put it in a more perfect way. Thank you so much, Michela. It's been wonderful talking with you, sharing this.
Wait, there's a question. Oh my God, we don't have. Thank you so much for your words. Thank you, Cara. Thank you.
Before we leave, I think we need to take a picture together. Our technical host will guide us.
Can I ask you something?
Yes.
If there was no coronavirus, would I be in Indonesia right now, or did you used to invite me?
Possibly.
I would have loved it. A nice Indonesian food. Love it.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I mean, we have to make do with whatever available during this time.
Of course, but it's perfect. It's already fantastic that we are able to do it in a way.
Yeah, Neta, can you guide us to take a picture?
Hi everyone, so please look at your camera and stay still for 1 to 2 seconds, and I will count to 3.
Okay.
1, 2, 3. One more time. One.
Let's take off our glasses, and so we do it without glasses. I see nothing, but at least.
All right.
One.
I can't see anything too.
Me neither.
1, 2, 3. One more time, please. 1, 2, 3. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Let me
thank
see.
You so much.
Thank you so much. It was fantastic.
Thank you, Michela. It was great. Thank you.
Grazie,
Take care.
Ragazzi. Anonymous attendee. Grazie a te. Bye bye.
Yeah. Bye.
Bye. Bye bye.
Okay, so that was our last film talk in this festival. Not only today, but in this festival. Unfortunately, itu tadi sesi film talk terakhir kita. Nanti untuk penanya yang terpilih akan langsung dihubungi oleh panitia. Dan jangan lupa untuk menyaksikan kembali film-film Europe on Screen yang sudah sold out, tapi ingin disaksikan kembali karena mungkin belum kebagian tiket. So if you want to catch up with some films that were sold out in the past 2 weeks, but you are unable to do so, you can do so from tomorrow until the 5th of December. While tickets last, you can see the available titles in our website, in our social media, at Europe on Screen. So yes, there are 12 films, 12 titles that will come back starting tomorrow until December 5th. So I'm Noval Yazid. I'm signing off. See you soon. Bye.